Hello there. Welcome to Frontlines of Social Good, where we're going to bring you the latest news and insights in the world of philanthropy, fundraising, and social impact. I'm Jay Frost. Welcome back, or welcome for the first time. It's great to see you here. We're kicking off this episode with the latest philanthropy news, as we usually do, covering the biggest gifts of the week, at least we've seen, and the latest government actions shaping the nonprofit sector. Then we have a special pre-recorded interview with Jay Love, active angel investor, former CEO, and seasoned tech entrepreneur. He'll share insights on game-changing tech for nonprofits, what's next in the field, and why it all matters. And after that, we'll sit down with, or join virtually, Julia Campbell, founder and principal of J. Campbell Social Marketing and author of Storytelling in the Digital Age, a guide for nonprofits. And her forthcoming book, Minimalist Marketing for Nonprofits. She'll share strategies for cutting through noise and making a real impact with your nonprofit's digital presence. So let's get started. We begin, as always, again, with the top 5 philanthropic gifts of the week. Coming in at number 1, $125 million to Children's Hospital of Philadelphia. Eileen and Brian Roberts and their family have donated the largest single gift in the hospital's 170-year history to create Roberts Children's Health, a new state-of-the-art inpatient tower set to open in 2028. Number 2, $50 million to Providence Mission Hospital Foundation. The Rancho Mission Viejo family has contributed to support the hospital's expansion, including the construction of a new Rancho Mission Viejo Health Center. At $50 million once again, a gift to Harvard University and 14 other institutions from OpenAI. OpenAI has donated the funds to fund artificial intelligence research as a part of NextGen AI, a consortium project. At Harvard, the funding will support initiatives at the law school, data science initiative, and the medical school. $50 million Canadian to Polytechnique Montreal came from Quebec-born philanthropist Pierre Lassonde, who has donated those funds to establish an institute dedicated to disruptive innovation. Lassonde, who's a graduate and expert in mining and precious metals, emphasized the importance of investing in homegrown talent, especially as Canada navigates economic tensions with the United States. The new institute aims to foster cutting-edge research and position Canada as a leader in technological advancements. And then we have a tie, which is $10 million to St. Joseph's Health Foundation from the Mihal Family Foundation, making that gift for transformative improvements in healthcare in Toronto's West End, and a $10 million gift to St. Louis University School of Medicine from an anonymous donor who is providing that gift to support medical education and research. In grants news, a couple of large stories. Forbes reports that federal agencies, including the National Institutes of Health and the National Science Foundation, have begun flagging grant proposals containing certain terms, including women, female, gender identity, and climate crisis. In these 197 terms may trigger reviews of your NIH NSF grant proposals. Forbes contributor Bruce Lee reports that the flagged terms, compiled from government memos by the New York Times, reflect a broader effort by the Trump administration to reshape federal language policies and limit references to diversity, equity, and inclusion in scientific research. While the exact consequences of using these terms remains unclear, potential actions include heightened review, funding rejections, or even withdrawal of existing grants. In a separate story, the chair of the National Endowment for the Humanities has left the agency at the direction of President Trump. Shelley Lowe, the first Native American to lead the NEH, was a Biden appointee. While no immediate staff or budget cuts at the NEH have been announced, the administration's recent actions, including canceling the NEA's Challenge America grants, suggest a shift in priorities towards promoting, quote, patriotic history in the lead up to America's 250th anniversary. As we navigate these shifts in philanthropy, from transformative gifts shaping the future of healthcare and education to policy changes impacting nonprofit funding, one thing remains clear. Innovation is crucial for the sector's success. And that's why I'm excited to introduce our next segment, a conversation with Jay Love. As an active angel investor, former CEO, and seasoned tech entrepreneur, Jay has spent his career at the intersection of technology and nonprofit advancement. In this interview, He shares his insights on game-changing innovations, the future of nonprofit tech, and why staying ahead of the curve is more important than ever. Jack? Jay, thank you very much for being here. I really appreciate it. And we're going to talk about a lot of things about the work that you're doing these days, although we can touch on all the things you've done in the past. For those who don't know you, let's start there. So tell us a little bit about Jay Love.
Well, I got involved in the nonprofit sector all the way back in the early 80s. I had been in the mini computer and industry, and someone said, hey, there's this little software company that's porting over a mini computer program, and it's going to be the very first PC database or CRM, a product called FundMaster that you will probably fondly remember. And you had to send it out over diskettes and stuff. And that was my home for the next 13, 14 years as we built FundMaster into a powerhouse in the United States, Canada, Great Britain, all the UK, Australia, New Zealand. It was a lot of fun. For that, that company was acquired by Blackbaud. I became part of Blackbaud for the first time. I sort of have this love-hate relationship with Blackbaud of being part of the company for a while and not being part of it for it. And I kept trying to introduce the idea that databases, that the concept of sending out diskettes was going to go away and it would eventually run over the internet. But it kept falling on deaf ears there. So myself and three of my associates created something called eTapestry, which was the very first web-based database. And it was when people were still using dial-ups. I don't know if you remember putting the phone in the coupler and all the weird noises and all, but we really had to make it expedient to do that. But eTapestry took off like a rocket ship and actually ended up having more customers than FundMaster did before it was all said and done. And it was a glorious, fun ride, helping people and making it available. And people kept saying, what's the catch? I can pay for this monthly or quarterly. I don't have to write you a check for $10,000 or $20,000 up front. And I said, sure, that's the way all software is going to be down the road and all. And I made a good, safe bet for the future there to do that. eTapestry went along great. It also became part of Blackbaud. This time I stayed at Blackbaud much longer and helped them start their arts and cultural web-based product and was doing that. And I thought I was going to retire, and I got involved with a company called Social Solutions as their CEO for a year out in Baltimore, which was fun, helping bring some changes there. And then I thought I was going to retire, and all of a sudden the concept of the most monumental problem facing most nonprofits that are engaged in fundraising is the retention of donors. And little did I know that most nonprofits retain less than 50% of their donors from one year to the next. I'm going, oh my gosh, any commercial business could never survive with that. So we created a product called Bloomerang to address just that. We said, if you can use this product, we'll build in all the best practices so your retention can move up 1 or 2 percentage points every year. And I said, this is going to be a winner concept. And it really has turned into that. And so now Bloomerang is one of the largest companies in the space, and it's just still going at a rapid speed toward its success. So, and I retired as I reached 65 there. And since that time, I've been actively involved in mentoring and investing and being on the boards of various startups that serve the nonprofit space. In fact, I think I'm actively involved with 12 or 13 of them as a board member right now.
The through line there seems to be, of course, nonprofit and tech. Why that intersection? That's unusual for both for investors, for VCs, but particularly for a sector that has this kind of arc. And you've been doing this since the FundMaster days, and I was a FundMaster user, so I remember it well. Why those two things?
Well, the nonprofit sector, which, as you can probably guess, I dearly love since it's been 43, 44 years now involved with it, they really have trouble keeping up with technology because most nonprofits, unless you're well above 10 million in annual revenue at the nonprofit, they don't have an IT staff or an IT person. Oftentimes it's a part-time person or a volunteer. So therefore, they tend to lag behind and make safe bets. Well, that causes them not to be able to do as good a job with their communications, with their marketing, with the day-to-day management, with measuring their outcomes. There are so many things that technology can make such a vast difference in doing. And I just sort of fell in love with saying, I can help small and medium-sized nonprofits compete with the big boys there on their technology by making it easy to use and easy to implement. And obviously, the internet has made such a big difference now because people don't have to install it locally. They can just tap into it by typing in a password and an ID, and they're into the applications. It's just a matter now of making those applications easy enough to use that a smaller nonprofit can implement them. But more importantly, if there's turnover of staff, they can keep using it without having to start all over.
Now, you were anticipating or kind of noting the trends all along the path there. You just described it. What are you seeing in terms of the needs today? What are the new things that you're trying to address, either as an investor or just as an observer?
Well, the biggest factor coming into play today is artificial intelligence, the AI components. They're making all of the rudimentary and basic decisions for you. So in this day and age right now, if you're doing a follow-up letter or a follow-up email or even a text to a donor or a prospective donor of your organization, it can be in rough draft form. The artificial intelligence component of any communication system now, whether it's in a database or in your email system or another communication system, it can pull together all the factors of everything it knows about that donor and say, these are the 5 points that you should be making to that individual or to that family to do that. And so that is tremendous impact. It's also helping shape your day-to-day activities. You know, some of the artificial intelligence-based companies that I'm working with right now, for instance, at 8 o'clock every morning, you get an email and say, these are your 5 most important tasks to do that day. And here are the 3 or 4 donors you should be touching base with today. This is their anniversary. This is their birthday. This is what's happening in their lives. And it's pulling all this information from not only the database, but from the internet and press releases, from social media, and it's pulling it all together and it's making these suggestions to you so that you as a human being can take the next step. And there's now even artificial intelligence where you can ask for permission from your low level donors and say, can I have an artificial intelligence bot communicate with you and find out what you would like to know about our organization and how you'd like to get involved. And the success track record of that so far and all the beta uses is off the charts.
It sounds like you're a power user of these things personally, as well as working with these companies. And I do want to dive into that, but maybe first tell us about the companies that you're identifying today. Since there's so much agency in using AI, I mean, I could use something
Right.
today and you wouldn't necessarily know I'm doing it, or I could be developing a new app and you wouldn't know about it. How are you discovering these pioneers and where are you finding them?
Well, most of them come as referrals because if you take the time to help a budding entrepreneur, particularly one that's maybe new to the nonprofit space and doesn't realize, all of the ethical questions that you must stay on the right side of, and how you must handle donor data, and how you must handle privileged communications and all for that, as you help them, particularly as they become successful, the word spreads. And also, I have been very, very fortunate with my companies that it has enabled me to have some funds to be a key investor to some of these companies. So as I hear about them, I'll evaluate them and say, here's some startup capital to help you with, or not only will I invest, but I'll introduce them to 20 or 30 other potential investors to do that. And honestly, Jay, once or twice a week, I'll get an email or text and say, hey, can I introduce you to so-and-so? I got 2 texts yesterday from other entrepreneurs that said, do you mind if I introduce you to a friend of mine that's getting ready to do something in this sector? And the evaluation process begins again, and we go through the process of seeing if it makes sense to get involved and how and even if I don't get involved, Jay, I try to help them with a lot of encouragement, a lot of suggestions, and pointing them in the direction of certain resources.
What are some of the ways that you vet these companies?
Well, believe it or not, I'm sort of old fashioned. I've got a good old Excel spreadsheet with about 40 or 50 items on there. And then I rate each item on a scale of 1 to 5. And then I add the point total up to see. And if it gets to a certain point total, then I know that that's got a really good chance. And something just basic that every budding entrepreneur should know: can they, within 5 or 10 minutes, send me the most current financial statements? And if they struggle with that and it takes them a week to get me their financial statements, I go, ooh, this person's not holding themselves and everybody around them very accountable to do that, because you should be able to go into whatever program you're using and say, this is last quarter's financial statements or last year's financial statements, and here's a current balance sheet and a cash flow statement for that. And so that's one of the biggies right there, as well as looking at their upcoming budget. And I'll say, do you have a budget going out 1 or 2 years on what you're projecting, not only for revenue, but I'd like to know what you're projecting in expenses. And then one of my favorite ones, I say, send me a list of what, if it's an ideal world, what are your first 50 employees going to look like? What are their roles?
Wow, how often do they know that?
Probably 1 out of 3.
That's really a forward-looking question. One of the things that I've run into a lot are people who have ideas. Some of them are brilliant. Some of them are, I don't know, but they're big ideas, but they may or may not have much developed yet. Do you run into that frequently? And if so,
Yes.
how do you help people who are at those very nascent stages figure out how to go from this kind of ether to something real?
Well, first of all, they've got to get a product that's workable and get a few beta users out there, a few of the preliminary users out there using the product. I always say, hey, demonstrate the product just like you and I are. We're in a Zoom meeting right now, and I could say, show me where the product's at right now and what you're going to be doing with it. And you quickly tell, have they surrounded themselves with people that make up for their deficiencies? Nobody out there has every quality to fulfill every role. So for instance, every time I was creating a business to serve the sector, I had to make sure I had a technical person. I had to make sure I had someone that was going to do the implementation and customer support. I could sort of cover the sales and marketing and the financing and things of that nature, but I had to have key people, at least 1 or 2 or 3 other individuals that would take care of the things that Jay Love wasn't very good at, or Jay Love didn't want to spend his time at. Because, if I had a decision of whether I was going to sit down and write any code or play with a spreadsheet or pick up a phone and call somebody like you, Jay, guess which one I did first?
One thing that strikes me about all this is that companies are often bootstrapping, probably at the stage where they're talking to you. So one of the questions is, how do they get that initial investment? And one of the ways, I suppose, is by talking to people like you. But that's been often difficult for them to figure out how to navigate that, unless they're referred, as the people you mentioned are. So how are people getting that initial investment in order to build those products and then start getting those beta customers?
Well, usually I'm getting involved, in the people that I know as other angel investors are usually involved after the quote unquote friends and family. So if you've got an idea, I always tell budding entrepreneurs, okay, first of all, how much can you personally invest? Then how much can your parents invest or your relatives? And then your close set of friends, that people, perhaps a roommate from college or a good friend that you have had, or a neighbor or somebody, and you round up enough money to get the prototype product built or the service built, and then you're ready to do it. And I always tell people, if you want to find out where you can reach individuals that are going to invest, you're not going to find them on Shark Tank. You're going to need to go someplace else to do it. And I say, think about the other companies that are in the sector. And if there's other startups, like if you go to a nonprofit conference and all the other vendors there, and there's 10 other vendors that are sort of in their early stages, ask them where they got their funding. And that's where they'll tell you who they worked with and who they had an opportunity to have discussions with. And that's where the referrals start to come into play to do that. So very few of them are listed on company websites, but sometimes they're listed as board members or advisory council members for those other companies. And you start to, one conversation leads you to another, leads to another, much like professional fundraising, Jay. Your next major donor is probably going to be someone that's introduced to you by a current major donor.
Right. That makes sense. It's also runs counter to what I've seen many nonprofits and for-profits try to do, which is to raise money through a crowdfunding mechanism. And that's not to say that crowdfunding can't work, but that may be a first step that people try. Do you run into that? And if so, do you see instances where crowdfunding can be successful for that?
Very seldom, unless there's a compelling reason, like there was an illness or some other life occurrence that makes it more compelling. Because as you know, on those crowdfunding sites, to rise anywhere up near the top, there has to be some compelling logic or reason behind the need to donate. Plus, I think it's important to build relationships with investors that say, okay, I'm going to put in a certain amount now, but if you reach these milestones and do what you tell you're going to do, I'll be part of your second round, or I'll be part of your third round of funding as it's needed for that. And so I think it's very important. On crowdfunding, a lot of times you don't know where those individuals that give the money, where they come from. And you never get a chance to thank them or continue to communicate with them very well.
Right, right. Now, you mentioned AI as being the big driver for a lot of change now. Can you talk about where you see that going, maybe through the lens of some of the companies that you are now working with and coaching? What kinds of applications? You mentioned agentic AI, I guess, a second ago. What are some of the things that you see opening up on the horizon?
Well, before we answer that, keep in mind that AI is just one aspect of many of these products now. The key thing you look for with anybody that's coming to you with a product or service, does it solve a real problem? And since I serve on the board of two nonprofits myself, I'll often ask somebody at one of those nonprofits that I work with, would this be of benefit to you? And I'll send them a slide deck and say, this is what this proposed product is going to do. And if I get an excited response from 2 or 3 nonprofits that I'm currently working with, then I know they're probably going to get that from others. So that's one of the other ways of vetting a new product or idea is, do current individuals employed in the sector find this to be worthwhile and exciting for them? But as you look at various products right now, whatever the product is, let's say you've got a service and you're going to help train people on some aspect of working at a nonprofit. Well, training this day and age of proposing what you're going to be trained with, or if you're going to be involved in role playing, artificial intelligence can help set up those various role plays, or can be involved in saying, this is what we would suggest to you to do. One that I'm working with right now, it's there to help train people to be professional fundraisers. And after you get done with the role play, it actually gives you a list of, this is what you did really good, this is what you need to work on. And by the way, here's an outline for your actual meeting with the potential donor coming up. And that's just marvelous. I can just imagine how many people over the years could have really used something like that. And now it's going to be at their fingertips over the next few upcoming years.
What's the part of this that's most exciting for you? I mean, especially working with the companies that are in this cohort today.
Watching them be successful, watching them make an impact. One of the things I encourage all the companies I'm on, I said, when you're having a board meeting, not every board member that's part of your company may know that much about the sector. There may be somebody that's a board member because they wrote a large check or something to help finance your business. I said, let's take the first 5 minutes of every board meeting or every board call and have a mission moment. I want you to take a case study of a recent customer or a recent testimonial and share it with the other board members. And that way they know how you're making an impact. And I said, make sure that's a prominent spot on your website of the satisfaction of very happy customers where you're fulfilling a problem, solving a problem in some way, shape, or form to do that. And so that's one of the ways I keep reminding them, you're obviously, you're in this as a business to be successful for you and your family, but your number one reason for existence is to solve problems and to make nonprofits better at what they do in some way, shape, or form. And keeping that at the forefront is the mantra that I always portray. And I know it's working when they just start doing it on their own. Or I'll get a text or an email and say, hey, I just got to share this testimonial we just got from a brand new customer. And you could just sense the excitement that reverberating through the startup company.
Jay, we're in a kind of an interesting time right now. Government support for nonprofits is challenging. We aren't really sure where it's going to land when we're meeting today. And we've also been for several years, and we talked about this in preparing for our discussion today, about this 2% of GDP, which is philanthropy, which hasn't grown for well, really forever. There have been a lot of efforts to try and grow philanthropy. Well, right now, there's going to be a greater need, arguably, than there ever has been in the United States anyway. What are your thoughts as you think about two things? This growth of companies like the ones you're working with that are providing innovative solutions for nonprofits to do good service, but then at the same time, there's this desperate need for dollars in order to provide the services that they may be able to provide, but that some of that funding may be shrinking. How are you reacting to the current environment? How do you think companies like these might be able to help?
Well, obviously, fundraising and generating the revenue for the organizations to fulfill their mission is probably the basis of 60 or 70% of the companies that I have the privilege of working with for that. And hopefully they can keep providing the ideas and the services that can make a difference for that. You know, you look at the tools that a major gift fundraiser at a large national university has. You know, I always, I remember I was in East Lansing, Michigan at an AFP conference talking, and I asked someone in the audience, I mean, how many of you here work for Michigan State? And it was like a third of the room. And I said, just tell me, how many major gift officers are there? And it was like hundreds. And then some of the smaller nonprofits in the room, they all of a sudden it hit them. I'm up against that and all of their resources. So I think part of it is, like I mentioned earlier, is equipping small and medium-sized nonprofits to hold their own, but also hopefully the items that we can bring to the table can make a difference at the board level and the volunteer level for the nonprofits. Because I don't know about you, but every time I join a nonprofit board, for some reason, I end up on the fundraising and development committee, Jay. I don't know why, but I do. And it never fails. The first couple of meetings I go to, it's never about how can we nurture and expand the existing donors. What is it they always want to talk about? How can we go get new donors, or how can there's 3 or 4 prominent families in the community. Why are they not supporting our organization? And no one ever says, what can we do to grow the existing donors? And at some point when we change that mindset, that will make a difference. And I think we can grow it from 2% to 3% to 4% of the GDP. But until that time, I mean, think about it. No restaurant in America could survive if they didn't have at least an 80 or 90% retention rate of their patrons. and the average retention rate for a nonprofit is 42 or 43%. You know, that when that changes, then the 2% will change, but not until then. I mean, you've been an active part of this. Don't you think that it's going to be very hard to have an impact there until that changes?
Oh, absolutely. But you just pointed to the underlying problem. It's not the donor, it's the mindset of the nonprofit.
Right. And sometimes the CEO or the executive director, may not realize that also to see. And when you take a look at the 990s, if you go in and take a look at that and say, which nonprofits doubled in size in the last 12, 24 months, those are the ones that are figuring it out. It used to be, for Bloomerang, all those years, our pricing was based on the number of records in the database. And one of my biggest things, I always ask at the end of the year, give me the top 10 customers who grew in size in the last 12 months. And I would call every one of them and congratulate them and ask them, how they were going about doing it. And yeah, obviously sometimes it was because a capital campaign took place and that made a big difference. But many times they were figuring it out. They had moved their retention rate from the 40s to the 60s or the 70s. And I'm going, oh my goodness, it's somebody that's really getting it and sharing it among their people.
So if you were to summarize all this, I think you've been pretty clear about it, but if you were to summarize it, what would be the big, 1, 2, or 3 pieces of advice you'd have for nonprofits, but also for companies or maybe ideas, people with ideas for companies that want to serve the sector?
Well, for the nonprofits, just realize not only for fulfilling their mission, but if you are counting on people to donate to provide a majority of your funding or more than 50% of your funding, it's all based on relationships to do that and to make sure that you treat them properly. I oftentimes when I'm speaking, I share stories now that my wife and I are major donors to several institutions on some of the little things that happen. Like the first time I made all of my annual fund gifts out of our donor advice fund. And obviously the donor advice fund, it somewhere if you dig, it says Jay and Christy Love on it, but the check actually comes with Charles Schwab's name on it. And some of the nonprofits we supported didn't get that right in their record keeping. So, you're saying, that's sort of basic blocking and tackling that has to be done to do that. So count on relationships. For the entrepreneurs, all of their fundraising for raising their capital is all based on relationships and fulfilling what you say you will do and having all of your I's dotted and your T's crossed so that you have things in order to do that, because you can just tell a well-run business is someone that's keeping track of everything. And I tell them, I said, when you finish a month, I would love to see the results within 2 or 3 days, because it's just like as we begin March Madness here, if we had these basketball teams running up and down the floor and there wasn't any scoreboard, would anybody even go to the game? No, it wouldn't be much fun at all to do that. So I tell them that it's based on relationship. And then secondly, execution, have a game plan and then faithfully execute it. And if you find that it's truly not working, only then do you do the proverbial pivot to something else. So many of them say, well, I'm not really executing, I'll pivot. And that's not the reason it's not working. It's for some other reason. So, but I'll tell you what, there's a lot of them out there executing very well, Jay, and it's just a joy to hear from them. I look forward to all the board meetings, the very next board meeting, of hearing what's happening and plotting out the strategy for the next 3 or 4 months.
And Jay, if people want to learn more about the kind of work that you do or just watch it from afar, what's the best way to do that?
Well, I would just take them to my LinkedIn address for that. And honestly, I don't know it off the top of my head, but if you just go to LinkedIn and Jay Love, I think it may have my middle name in there somewhere, Jay Barclay Love, for it. But if you find me on LinkedIn and if you send a request, I'll always become connected with anybody on LinkedIn. And then I list out and you can see where things are happening and it connects you to some of these various startups through that. So I think that's the best resource.
Thank you so much, Jay. Really appreciate it.
Oh, thank you, Jay. It's always fun.
Really a pleasure talking with Jay. Thank you again to him for conducting that interview over the weekend, a very busy weekend. His insights really do highlight how critical tech is in shaping the future of nonprofit fundraising and engagement. But of course, even with the best tools at our disposal, the real challenge for nonprofits is cutting through the noise and connecting meaningfully with our audiences. And that's where our next guest comes in, Julia Campbell. She's a leader in nonprofit digital marketing, the author of Storytelling in the Digital Age, and will soon be releasing, I don't know the date, and she may not yet either, but will soon be releasing her new book, Minimalist Marketing for Nonprofits. She's built a career helping organizations navigate the fast-changing digital landscape, to tell compelling stories, engage supporters, drive real impact. And I can tell you, I've always looked to her as a person who really knows this stuff better than anybody else. So it's really a pleasure to have Julia Campbell back here. Thank you so much, Julia, for spending some time today.
Yay. Thank you for having me, Jay. I'm excited to be here.
It's great to see you. And I do want to talk with you about the new book, but maybe we can talk about this kind of broadly.
Sure.
And that's the concept is actually baked into the new title anyway, which is Minimalist Marketing for Nonprofits. So when you're talking about that, forget the book for a second. When you're talking about that, what does that mean? And why do we need to think in this minimalist manner to be maybe even more effective than we've been?
Exactly. And I think that what happens is that nonprofits tend to get focused on the shiny new tools, the technology. They get very overwhelmed and whiplashed by all of the information coming at them. They need to know about big data and personalization and segmentation and AI. And those things are very important. But I think we need to get back to the basics of what works in marketing. And minimalist marketing is about focusing on the Pareto principle, so the 80-20 rule, where 20% of the work that you do are really going to achieve 80% of the results. And it's about eliminating unnecessary efforts that drain time and resources. And it really helps nonprofits, especially small ones, simplify their strategy and amplify their impact.
So when you're talking about that, is the 80-20 rule different for different organizations or different parts of the sector, or are there some things that really every organization, big or small, needs to focus on first?
Exactly. Well, that depends. So I do, I teach a framework in the book, and that I'm currently writing, and it's sort of a TBD when it's going to be published. But the framework is, the first step, it's really 3 steps. Step 1 is identify your marketing North Star. So that's how to focus on which channels and activities deserve your time. And then step 2 is streamlining content creation, which is, I think, where we get stuck. So we're spending 6 hours creating an Instagram reel. Okay, is that really the best use of our time when maybe we could be writing an op-ed for the local newspaper, or we could be, spending that time doing a LinkedIn Live that then we can repurpose into a podcast, into a blog post, into an email newsletter. So how can we streamline the content that we're creating rather than just throwing spaghetti on the wall to see what sticks? And then step 3 is really important, and something that falls by the wayside too often is measurement, looking at your analytics to help you improve. So this is how to track the right metrics in order to make smarter marketing decisions. I really don't think that a lot of organizations focus on these 3 pieces of the framework, or they just sort of focus on getting on the brand new platform, posting for a few days, not having a strategy, not understanding their marketing North Star, not understanding their audience, and really not understanding the platform. So something I see all the time that nonprofits are getting wrong in their marketing is they think they are their audience, and they think they understand what their audience wants. So they've been creating flyers for years. So let's just create a flyer and put it on Facebook or put it on Instagram without really understanding does that kind of content, number one, work for our audience? And does a flyer work on these channels, which we know the answer is no. So we need a better understanding of, we can't really put that square peg in a round hole anymore. And the trends that I'm seeing are nonprofits that go a mile deep rather than like an inch wide on social media tend to get the best results. So less is more, quality over quantity. And it's a scary time because we think we have to be everywhere. We're facing pressures from the board, from the executive director, from our coworkers, from media, from headlines to do more, do more, do more. But is doing more really getting us where we need to go? Is it getting us the results? And I think the answer is too often no.
You said something in the midst of that. I want to actually dive into each of these because they're so great and they're so clear. But you said one thing, which is that people kind of think they know what the audience wants or believes or something like that. That seems to imply that we don't really know unless we ask, or we need to survey, or we need to do something. What is it that organizations can do to figure out what they need to be communicating in a way that resonates for people? Maybe that's the North Star. How do we get there?
We need to do several things. One, we do need to pay attention to our analytics if we're doing digital marketing. We need to look at our email open rates. We need to look at the subject lines that work. We need to look at what people are clicking on. We need to look at the videos that we're creating and what are people watching? Are they commenting? Are they sharing? Are they tagging friends? Where are they dropping off in the video? We need to be much more intentional and proactive in analyzing what's working and doing more of what's working, and then killing your darlings. It's a very famous Stephen King quote that I struggle with as well. I think a lot of marketers do. Killing your darlings just means, oh, I have this great sentence, but it's not moving the plot. Or I have this great character that I want to insert in the book, but it's not going to move the plot. It's not going to work. So reading everything by Stephen King that he writes on writing, because he's has fabulous insights, but not being afraid to say, okay, we have been on this platform for 3 years and it has not, and it's changed. Maybe its ownership has shifted. Maybe the people on it has shifted. Maybe the nature and the tone, maybe our audience is not on there anymore. And really just looking like, is our audience still there? Are they engaging? Maybe they've shifted to another platform. Even if we think we love this particular platform or we love this particular type of content, is it changing with the times? Is it relevant? Is it timely? Is it adapting to the trends? Is it adapting to what our audience wants to see? So how do we do this? We talk to our audience anytime we can. I completely believe attending events, going to orientations, responding to emails, sending out surveys, being proactive in figuring out what people want. In fact, I recently just created a completely random survey, a nonprofit social media survey, because I found that I was not seeing what small nonprofits are doing on social media. I was only really seeing data from larger organizations or from marketing agencies that put out surveys from, the big tech companies or big brands. So I just created a very informal survey, sent it to my email list, put it on my Facebook page, sent it to a bunch of listservs, put it on LinkedIn, just saying, hey, I really want to hear from the small nonprofit. Where are you? What are you doing? What are you struggling with? How many platforms are you on? Sort of all these questions that I had. And, if you don't ask, you're never going to know. So looking at your analytics, because it will give you that real-time data of what's working and what your audience likes and is responding to. And then also just asking them and being responsive. And social media, especially email marketing as well, it's a two-way street. You have to be able and willing to respond to the comments and the questions that you're getting, your DMs, your emails, but also going in and actively seeking what is going on in the industry. What are some other organizations working in this cause area that are doing really well in marketing? And how can I see what they're doing and maybe emulate it for my audience? So we get hung up on the things that we think work, that we have always worked, that our board wants to work, but it's 2025 and demographics are changing, donor preferences are changing, platforms are changing. So just being willing and able to adapt to it.
What did you learn through that really surprised you, this survey that you just conducted?
Oh, so I'm looking at the results right now. I have 332 responses. I want to get 1,000. So that's my goal. So I'm going to be promoting it more. Most of the respondents, it looks like 50% have 1 to 5 full-time staff. 60% of those organizations have one staff person where social media is a part of their role. And then it looks like the majority spend 10 to 20 hours a month on social media management. So these are very, very small nonprofits that are definitely bootstrapping. It also looks like about 100% use Facebook. LinkedIn is growing, Blue Sky is growing, Threads is growing. So I can't wait to dive into the data. I'm talking to them about their primary goals, their biggest challenges. No shocker here, finding time, having a budget, learning the algorithms, planning content. The reason I wanted to send out the survey is that I feel that, especially as a solo entrepreneur, talking to nonprofits, I really want to know what's going on in the trenches. So I have clients, I have students, but I think it's important that we understand, when we're teaching, what exactly are the biggest struggles right now, and then how can we create content around those struggles. I think that a nonprofit could easily create marketing content around the top 5 biggest misconceptions in their cause or issue area, or what are the top 5 questions that you're getting from donors or from clients or from volunteers. What are some stereotypes you can address? I mean, we need to really look at where people are finding challenges, and that's the kind of content they want to see. Content that educates them, that inspires them, that helps them feel connected. That's the content that we should be creating on social media, not just promotional content over and over again.
You alluded to Twitter,
Yes.
X, a few minutes ago. And I don't know if you want to talk about your position on that or not, but you alluded
Oh,
to
I can talk about my position on
it. Feel free. I mean, because you did say that platforms change ownership, and sometimes that changes the complexion of the content or the participants within that universe. It's certainly something that we've observed there. What are your thoughts as people do what you're talking about, which is to be more minimalistic or aim small, miss small, pick the places where the conversations, like the ones you just mentioned, those kinds of the 5, this, the 5, that, the things that really engage people in a conversation is meaningful to them, not just to us, but to them. Talk about the platforms in that context. Where are the places where people can spend time that are really meaningful now?
I think that organizations should be looking at YouTube. I don't know. YouTube is not really a social media platform in the sense that social media was created and social networks were created so we could connect with friends and family. But YouTube is the #2 search platform, owned by the #1 search platform, and people are using it to search. And they're using it for how-to videos, educational content, and they're using it to watch stories and to watch YouTube shorts. And if you're trying to reach a brand new audience, YouTube videos, of course. Now we don't know what's going to happen with Google, but you own those videos on YouTube. You can download them at any time. You can get them back. You don't own your followers. You don't own your followers on any platform that is owned by a third party, of course. But I feel like focusing on, LinkedIn is really a place where I'm seeing a lot of positive engagement. I'm seeing a lot of people commenting. I'm seeing a lot of sharing and uplifting and amplifying voices. And what you need to be doing, I mean, if you do it even just every year or every 6 months, is auditing all the platforms where you are. It's almost like looking at your bank account and seeing, oh, I have 15, this is what I did just yesterday, 15 streaming platform subscriptions.
Do you?
Well, yes, because I watch a lot of TV, and of course, every show I watch is on a different platform.
No
But I
shame
had to
in
have
that.
like it come to like Jesus moment where what can I combine? What can what can I do here? So I think we need to do that with our social media platforms. We need to audit, where are we? Where are we spending time? Are we just on this platform because we feel like we have to be? Also, some platforms are very toxic places. Twitter, to me, X, the second Elon Musk purchased it and took away content moderation, and I was seeing pretty insane things in my feed, people I'd never followed. I determined for me that it was kind of an insane place. I didn't delete my profile because I guess if you delete it, someone can take your identity. So I haven't deleted it. I just don't post there. But that was a decision I made. And of course, the same argument could be made about Meta. The same argument could be made about Google and YouTube. The same argument could probably be made about Microsoft and LinkedIn. There are all sorts of arguments you can make around the corporate ownership of these platforms. I always encourage organizations when they're doing marketing, have content that you can completely control. So whether it's a blog or a podcast or even maybe a LinkedIn newsletter that you can then, take that content and put it somewhere else. Email marketing is still incredibly powerful. So we focus so much on video content, short form video, TikTok versus Instagram Reels, but we don't own any of it. And it's so ephemeral and it disappears. On TikTok, it disappears in a few minutes. Instagram, it disappears in a couple days, really, from people's feeds. So thinking about what are some long-term assets, content assets we can create, like ebooks and research reports, and putting it on our blog so we can be discoverable, making longer videos for YouTube, thinking through what are some things that we can make that then we can repurpose for social media into short snippets, but not rely on social media as our main marketing channel because it's just so fraught and it changes so much, especially for the nonprofit sector. Social justice and political issues are actually, Meta has said they are, what's it called, demoting them in the feed because their people, their users have said they don't want to see it. So it's getting harder and harder to get seen when we don't control the means of production, right? We don't control the algorithms. So having those places where we can control the content and own it and then maybe repurpose it into shorter snippets for social media.
I want to ask you about storytelling. You've alluded to it
Yes.
here. It's been a big theme in your work, and it's really
Yes.
important.
It's my favorite thing.
So where does storytelling fit in this whole thing? Because you've just described, for example, platforms, and like you said, they can be quite ephemeral. So a few seconds on TikTok can be really meaningful at the moment, but it is a short time window to tell a story. Then you've got YouTube where people can have something that's on there for, it could be hours. So there's a lot of different platforms. And here we're not just talking about where it resides and what their policies are, but also what's the platform for telling a story. Could you talk about storytelling kind of writ large? Is there a story we're trying to tell that then gets divided up on according to which platforms are more effective?
Yes.
Or what is the kernel of how people should think about storytelling and deploy it in the places where it's most meaningful?
With storytelling, I think the traditional way we've done storytelling is not working anymore, where I see a lot of videos, I see a lot of emails, I see a lot of content that say, "Hi, my name is Julia and I work for Transitions Family Violence Services." No, instantly that's not going to work in our context. You have to have a hook, you have to have an angle, whether it's a statistic that starts off the story, whether it's you start in the middle of the story, like Julia was homeless and didn't know where to turn. And then she met a caseworker at Rosie's Place or something. We have to shift and change up the way we're doing storytelling to fit into this marketing landscape. Storytelling is going to always be the crux of what makes people connected to your organization. So if you are relying on research and data, it's never going to be as connecting as a story of a real person, or maybe an amalgamation, or maybe you're changing the names and details. You don't have to use real people's faces. You can tell a third party story. But the story of your organization, you really can tell it through staff members, honestly. So I'm thinking of candid.org. They do a fantastic job on social media. They don't serve clients. So they are a think tank. They serve nonprofits. They provide a lot of research and advocacy for the sector, but they don't have cats or dogs or kids or elderly people, or, they don't have clients, but their staff is the story, and the staff tells the story of the organization, their purpose, and what they're trying to do for the sector. So when we think of storytelling, it doesn't have to be the hero's journey. It doesn't have to be Luke Skywalker or, Katniss Everdeen of the Hunger Games. It really can be an anecdote. I see storytelling, especially in digital marketing, as a big connect the dots. So they're all little dots kind of connecting your mission and connecting your vision to the organization. It could be just a little anecdote from a volunteer. It could be a question. It could just be one sentence. It doesn't have to be the be all end all story that's going to rule them all. And that's where I think a lot of nonprofits get wrapped up and get overwhelmed.
So is the ultimate goal then of these stories, regardless of whether they're short or long form and whether they're whatever they are, but especially these anecdotes,
Yeah.
lead us all back to the theme, or what
They just have to tie to your brand and your mission, and they have to tie to your marketing North Star. Like, what do you want to be known for? At the end of the day, if my mother is asking me what's Best Friends Animal Society, I might not be able to tell her what you do, but I should be able to tell her why you do it and how you make me feel. So it's sort of like the famous Maya Angelou quote, no one will remember what you said or what you did, but everyone will remember how you made them feel. So all of the stories that you're sharing should make me feel something, connect to something, even if I can't describe what it is, but I should be able to say, this is for me. I'm part of this. I want to be a part of this organization and what they do. And whether your content makes me angry, like PETA, the People for the Ethical Treatment of Animals, the stories they share is designed to evoke anger and provoke action and advocacy on the behalf of their fans. Whereas Best Friends Animal Society takes a very different tack, and they share inspiring and hopeful stories of animals and never share photos of abused animals. So it depends on what you want to be known for and your marketing North Star, what you want people to say about you at the end of the day. Like if they could say 3 words to describe your organization, tack those 3 words up on your wall, and all of your content you're sharing, all of the stories you're telling should relate to that at the end of the day. And people need to hear and see things multiple times before they truly understand them.
So you talked about how in preparing your own survey and by the way, it sounds like you have a lot of responses, but you're still learning a lot. So we'd love to hear about it when you get to 1,000.
Yes, I would love to.
But it does sound like you're trying to make sure that we're adjusting for the big messages coming from the big organizations that get a lot of the big money. And now you're listening to a lot of the small organizations that maybe don't have a lot of staff. You said 1 to 5, maybe a lot of them have just 1 or half time. If with limited resources, a lot of nonprofit leaders are wearing multiple hats, including marketing, including social. What's one simple action that they could take today to improve their online presence and make sure it ties to, of course, their North Star?
Identify what you want to be known for. If I'm at a dinner party, someone asks me about your organization, people ask me all the time, where should I be giving money on Giving Tuesday? Does my money actually contribute? If I have $5 to give a month, does that really work? I mean, these are questions that real people not in our sector are asking. So if you could have 3 words for what you are known for, just identify those 3 words, identify your marketing North Star. If people are talking about you, if people are writing about you, if someone asks me about you, how do you want me to feel? What do you want me to say? And it's not your mission statement. It's not what you do. It's why you do it and your vision for what you do. So just get extreme clarity on your why and why you do it. And I think that's going to help you identify that marketing North Star, where all of your marketing messages, now you know where they're going or what the thread is that ties them together.
Julia, this is terrific. Thank you so
Thank
much for sharing this. We're going to
you.
look
I loved
forward to
it.
your new book. We love the contributions you make all the time for the sector. How can people learn more about your work and maybe your past books and hear about the next one?
Sure. So my blog and my books, everything's on my website, jcsocialmarketing.com. My podcast is Nonprofit Nation. Just look it up, any podcast app. New episodes Wednesday. And I love LinkedIn. I'm on LinkedIn and Instagram probably the most. So just look up Julia Campbell and you'll find me.
Thank you so much, Julia. It's great to see you.
Thank you, Jay.
And folks, before we wrap up here, I want to tell you about some of the stuff that's coming up on March 20th on How to Raise, which is our CA-free accredited show. That's this Thursday. We have Getting the Most from Prospect Identification Screenings with industry expert Brian Lacey of Brian Lacey & Associates. If you've ever wondered how to turn data into deeper donor relationships, this session will help you unlock the power of prospect screening. Then next Tuesday on this show, Frontlines of Social Good, we return with 4 nonprofit advocacy superpowers, featuring Bethany Snyder, director of the Iowa Nonprofit Alliance and founder of Snyder Strategies. We'll dive into the strategies that give nonprofits a powerful voice in advocacy, helping them drive real policy change. And we'll be joined by David Morgan, author of Generation Innovate, about his new book, Heartbeats and Algorithms. Plus, on the PM podcast, which you can listen to anytime and wherever you like to listen, whether that's on DonorSearch's YouTube channel or on any of the podcasting platforms, Apple, Spotify, etc., you can hear right now about Tony Martinetti's journey from nuclear missile silos to the comedy stage and all the way to nonprofit radio, his show that's been bearing his name and sharing incredible conversations for the past 15 years. Plus, this Friday, we release our conversation with Eileen Heisman. It's a name I'm sure you know, longtime CEO of National Philanthropic Trust, one of the fastest growing and largest charities in America. She tells us about her personal journey. All of this and more can be found on the website of our sponsor, DonorSearch, the world leader in artificial intelligence and prospect research solutions for the nonprofit fundraising world. So until next time, thanks for being here. Stay engaged, stay informed, keep making an impact. We'll look forward to seeing you next time.